All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started here. We'll wait for a few people to trickle in at the back of the room. So just a reminder that today's session is going to be recorded and will be available after Opticon. And please, after this session, get on the phone and join the conversation on Twitter at #Opticon18. So we want to hear from you. Please give us your feedback, good, bad, and different. We want to make sure that we're delivering the best content for you. And rate the session on your mobile app. All right. So let's get down to business here. So it is my extreme pleasure to introduce Brooks Bell, who is the CEO and founder of Brooks Bell. And she is a global strategist, a business leader, a pioneer in digital experimentation, and in the conversion optimization industry. She was one of the first to start this and has an unbelievable amount of knowledge and that she's going to share with us today. Since 2003, Brooks Bell and her team have helped top global brands build world-class experimentation programs. They're one of Optimizely's top partners and an absolute pleasure to work with. So it is my extreme honor to introduce you to Brooks Bell.
Thanks, Sharon. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Sharon, for that wonderful intro. So we all know the story of Isaac Newton. He was sitting under a tree, and an apple fell on his head, and then he went on to discover gravity. I was thinking about this story a few months ago, and I was wondering, could that really be true? It's just such a simple story. Was he really actually hit on the head with an apple? So I went to Wikipedia, and I started looking into it, and it's actually pretty accurate. What actually happened with Newton is that he owned an orchard, and one day he was wandering through his orchard on this beautiful afternoon, and he just saw an apple fall to the ground. But then what happened is, as he saw it fall to the ground, he thought, now why is this apple falling to the ground versus why doesn't it fall sideways or simply float up in the air into space? And then he kept thinking about that question and pondered it for weeks, and eventually led to his theory around gravity. What Newton did right that day is that he asked why. He wasn't thinking about how he can produce more apples in his orchard or make his orchard better looking. He was looking at the root cause of his environment. And I want to talk about this today because we still have something to learn from Newton 300 years later. Today, we don't do that great of a job looking at the root causes behind our programs. We do a great job asking what works. Changing a button color, we want to see if blue is better than orange. We want to see if badges work. We want to see if a new design works. And of course, experimentation is perfect for that. It will give us scientifically valid answer to whether it works. But then we move on. And I think that is an opportunity I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk about why it's so important for us to start asking why we're not doing as good of a job asking why as we could be. And I also am going to share with you a framework that we've created at Brooks Bell that helps us give a little bit of structure going through this process. So who is the foremost expert at asking why? Tell me, someone right? A toddler, yes, you're right. I knew the parents in the room would know the answer to that. So I actually asked, before I put in a slide, I asked a few people, I asked them for the answer, and the segment is very clear. Parents always say toddlers, non-parents have no idea. So toddlers ask why. They can't stop asking why. And it shows that asking why is innate to being human. We're born with it. But then we grow up and we join an experimentation program or an analytics team or a marketing team, a product team, and we just kind of stop. Now, why is that? And I think it has to do with fear. Why would we be afraid to talk about this? There's a lot of really good reasons. First of all, there is a famous Which Test Won game that I'm sure we have all used because it's super effective. We show the control and the variation and ask our audience to guess which one won. And most of the time they get it wrong. And then we prove our point that we have to listen to the data, that we don't know our customers. There we have it, we have to test. The problem with that game is that it also goes on and undermines our motivation to even attempt to understand why, to even attempt to predict it. And I think in the long term, it's something we want to avoid. The second reason is that asking why would lead to all these possibilities. It would be chaos. Everyone would have a different idea maybe. None of them are provable. The data didn't show it. It's not scientific. And then what do we do with that? That just feels like some extra steps, a little bit of extra work, and a lot of chaos we don't want to deal with. The next reason we don't ask why is that no one likes being wrong. We really don't like being wrong because we're all very data-driven people. That's why we got into this job in the first place, because we have this scientific pedestal that we can stand on that will prevent us from ever being wrong, because the data will take care of that for us. So if we start talking about why, we could definitely be wrong, and that's just something we want to avoid. The last reason is that, if a test wins, who cares? Let's just take it and move on to the next thing. We've got a lot of other stuff to do, and it's just, why waste the time? No one really wants to know, as long as we are making money for our companies. Come on, let's go to the next slide here. So one company that did start asking why and really benefited from it is Lowe's. Their analytics team started seeing some patterns in their data and went on to start to promote something that they saw happening. And it was this one very simple and very powerful insight. And that insight is that people shop for projects, not products. I mean, who goes to Lowe's looking for lumber? Instead, you're going to Lowe's, you want to build a deck. And this is not something that they didn't build the company thinking about that. And once they have this idea, how would that change how they could lay out their stores, how they lay out their site, how their salespeople talk with their customers? This is super powerful and has amazing potential impact for the company. And it came out of experimentation and analytics. The opportunity of asking why exists for us, and it's something worth doing. The reason is that asking why, it will help us uncover the lasting insights about our customers. What's something that works may only work on a single page, or maybe only work for this one design, maybe only work for this one platform. And as soon as that thing changes, it doesn't work and we have to start over. If we know why it worked and it's about the customer does not change nearly as often as everything else. And that will make the work that we do together last so much longer and deliver a lot more value to a lot more people in the organization. The second reason there's a huge opportunity here is that whoever owns the narrative wins. And the why is the narrative. A lot of times, because we're sort of a research organization and we have a lot of stakeholders, and because we don't like going there, we just want to look at the data, we leave the narrative for someone else to take. Other people are also asking why, and so someone else is going to decide what story to tell. Then that's fine. But why can't we tell the story? We're the ones who are closest to it. We're the ones who really get the data. We understand all the nuance of all those different metrics. And we also are objective. Naturally, that's why we're in this business. And we care about the customer. We care about the business. And we have the right and the skill to be able to drive the narrative ourselves. And I think that will be better for the customer and better for the business if we attempt to own it and help our stakeholders give them options of what really might be happening. And that's how we change a culture for experimentation. So how do we do this? where do we start? It starts with changing our altitude. Let's go on a hike together. We'll start at the bottom of the mountain, and it'll be all woods. There'll be lots of trees, and you'll see all the detail of the trees around you. You'll see the dew on the leaves, little pebbles and little rocks in front of you, and that is what you'll be focusing on when you're at the bottom of the mountain. Then let's move up, start walking up the mountain, and the trees start to thin, and we're starting to see some cliffs in the distance. We stop focusing really on the pebbles and the dew, and now starting to look at the view beyond. But we have a nice amount of detail and perspective that's coming into view. Then we get to the top of the mountain, and we're at the summit. This is the whole point of our hike. It's beautiful. We can see where we came from. We can see some of the trail that we were on, but we can also see the mountains and the water in the distance, and it's great. It's really a great perspective that is both far-reaching and still detailed. So we finished our hike, but let's continue thinking about altitude. Let's go ahead and float above our hike, and now we're flying over the mountain that we just hiked together. And now we can see the mountain range that this is part of, but we really can't see the trail we were on anymore. Now we're going up further, and we're in a satellite orbiting the Earth, and we can see everything, but we can really kind of see nothing. So I share this because I think this is also a useful tool is when we start thinking about why. Different whys also fit into different altitudes of the type of detail that they have, the scope that they have, and also some are better than others. If we want something, a why statement that is not so high that it's not useful, like the satellite, but we don't want to be so low that it's not transferable. Being transferable is like the key thing that I want to kind of talk a little bit more about. Altitude is part of the Brooks Bell Insight framework that we have been building, and it is our attempt to try to tame all this chaos and give us some structure so that we can still have a scientific approach to dealing with something that's very creative and unstructured and has lots of possibilities. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pieces of this framework. The first idea is a customer theory as a concept. It's just a fancy word for any explanation for what had happened. Why did blue beat the orange? It could be all kinds of stuff. Every single test might have 100 different explanations. And they may all be right. None of them may be right. Some are useful, some are not useful. But you want to start at least coming up with explanations. Another thing is that everyone on the testing team and some of the stakeholders should be part of this. Everyone's going to have a different perspective, and they're all going to be good. And also, it helps everyone kind of get out of analytics mode into empathy mode, and it's super fun. So you start coming up with theories about what is going on with your customer or why this worked. Once you have a bunch of theories that you've come up with together, you start categorizing them together. And this is where altitude comes in play. The first level is outcome. And this is ground level. Name is out. It is the outcome, the ground level altitude. And that's just all the data. That's all the detail that is scientifically valid. And this is probably what you're already doing today. The next level is the base camp. And base camp customer theories are really about your immediate user experience. Maybe it worked because you could see it better. Maybe it worked because it loaded faster. Maybe it was above the fold. Those very simple explanations. The next is summit. And these are any explanations that have to do with the state of mind of the customer while they were shopping or on the site that day. What do they know? Were they anxious? Were they overwhelmed? Were they bored when they came? The next is Jetstream. Jetstream is now about who your customer is. How is your customer different from other customers, and how could that explain their behavior? Maybe your site appeals to older people who are not tech savvy at all. And maybe having a non-tech savvy person would explain why the simplified version worked. Who knows? The next is satellite. That's the highest level. These are anything that's very broad. All behavioral economics falls into this, like social proof or law of reciprocity. Maybe it could be something like, oh, the sale worked because we all love saving money. So that might be true. It may or may not be helpful. So the Summit and sometimes Jetstream tend to be the most transferable levels. And that is the habit we want to start to get into, is looking at the state of mind and who your customer is as an explanation that may be worth looking into further and may be worth talking about to really see if it's true. Some examples of Summit-level customer theories are that toy shoppers already know what toy they want to buy on mobile. That could maybe explain why maybe the long copy descriptions didn't really do anything. They didn't help. Another could be that leisure travelers, they trust their peers' opinions more than the hotel's marketing. They're talking about trust. Maybe that's why the ratings and reviews did well. When it comes to mortgages, people become overwhelmed with information. It's their biggest purchase ever. And so maybe thinking about how can we help them through this, getting them the right information at the right time. So how we use information from mortgages might be really important. We work with a beauty site, and I want to give a little case study on using this method with a test that we did with this site. So it's a very simple test. It was simply a chat. They already had chat, but what they wanted to do is make it more effective. So the task was to expand it and also have a few descriptions on it, so it's easier to see. So how did this do? It won by 2.3% in RPV. Great. Normally, in the past, we would come up with a very fancy report, talk about all the other segments and all the metrics, but really say, well, it did work, made this amount of money, and we should keep doing it. And we should move on to the next test. In this case, we want to still go through that, but say, like, also, here is why we think it worked. And let's think about it and talk about it. So when we're trying to come up with, like, well, why could chat work? The best thing you can do is get aggressively empathetic with your customers. So this is a beauty site, and I was thinking, well, what is it like to buy makeup? And normally we do this at a department store. Who in here has ever gotten a makeover? Like all the women? Any men? You can be courageous. So it's pretty fun. Anyone who got a makeover. You're sitting in the middle of the department store, and this lady, it's usually a woman, she is sitting there telling you how beautiful you are, how your skin is so great, and how this little thing is going to just make you even more beautiful. And it's fun to be fawned over, and you feel special, and it's fun. But it's also a very anxious experience, because you're also in public on a very uncomfortable chair under these bright lights, and this lady is like touching your face, and it's like really intimate, and there's strangers walking by, and this is normally something you do in private, and now you're in public, and anyway, all this psychology of like this very vulnerable, kind of intense feeling that leads you to, you have to buy this makeup because you've been through this experience. So anyway, that is, I think, how that goes. How do we take that whole idea of thinking like a makeup customer, and how does it apply to the site? Does it apply? I don't know. But is relevant. Could that explain why this chat box worked? So let's go through the process of coming up with why. Maybe from the highest level, loss aversion, that maybe we're trying to buy makeup online and we're afraid of losing money. We're afraid of buying the wrong thing since we can't try it out in person. Maybe when women buy makeup online at this site, maybe they're looking for a new product rather than refilling an old product, and that's why maybe they're anxious because they're not familiar with it, which is why they're using chat. Maybe we'll just say women are anxious about buying the wrong makeup, and so they need to be reassured by an expert. Or maybe it was simply easier to see the box once we expanded it. All of these could be right, none of them could be right. But what is going to be useful to actually follow through on, and where could we possibly have more tests? I think actually both of the middle ones could be useful. But I'm going to talk about the lower one, that they're anxious about buying the wrong makeup, and so they need to be reassured. What's great about this site is that they actually have already transferred this idea to many other parts of the site. So they're actually already proving out that this may be true. On the site, they have another page that has all this reassuring language. It says, we've got your match, and it's guaranteed. Our experts are here to help. It's free shipping and free returns. Return it now and try another one. It's easy, super reassuring. They also have another feature where it's a virtual makeup, a lipstick try-on that also is about reassuring your confidence in buying it online without being able to try it on. So clearly, this is working for them, this reassurance idea. Actually, and so when it's transferable, it is taking a customer theory and upgrading it to an insight. So another formal part of the model is the process from going from a customer theory into an insight. By the way, I did use the virtual lipstick and tried on espresso pop, maybe a little garish. Then I went with rose water, and maybe a little too bright for me. Then I thought maybe I could scale back into some more air kiss, but kind of washed me out. So today I'm wearing Adore You. So we have upgraded transferable customer theories to an insight. Having a single test that supports an insight is certainly not statistically significant. We have no idea if we picked the right one or what, but it's worth looking into. And this is where iteration comes in play. You have got to start to iterate on these ideas. It's actually easier than it seems. In some cases, you've probably run previous tests that you weren't thinking about this insight, and maybe it actually applies, and you can start to build a case around the insight. But it's all about having an iterative model. In our model, we think that you should have at least 5 experiments that supports an insight before you can claim that it's accurate and true, and it's something that you can really talk about publicly. And we're calling it a key insight. Let's talk about one more case study. Who here has been to a theme park recently? Like, pretty fun. I really love theme parks. My husband and I used to go all the time to Orlando as adults, and we were still in our 20s, but I thought, why don't adults go to this? This is super fun. So I think theme parks are fun, but they're also really kind of difficult. There's like crowds everywhere. It's like sweltering heat. And there's lines everywhere you go in front of every ride. And then there's a line at the front door. And they're really expensive. Like the tickets are like over $100. And if you have a family of 4, you're looking at like $400 or $500. And then you get there, there's all these like expensive churros you have to buy and hats and whatever. It's a very expensive, fun, very stressful, intense day. So we're working with a theme park, and they want to move some of this online and make it a better experience for their visitors. And so they want to make it possible for you to buy your ticket online before you arrive, so at least you can skip the first line and go straight through to the front gate. So here is their flow. You look at it, it looks pretty good. It's pretty straightforward. 3 steps, 1 page. And so we're trying to help them optimize this, so this seems like a good place to start. So thinking, what can we do with this? What are some areas that maybe could be better? So we started thinking about asking some questions about this. It's pretty low friction, pretty easy. Is that actually helpful for a high consideration purchase? So that led to some other questions. Does a $400 or $500 price, is that a high consideration purchase? Do people want a low friction experience, or is this overwhelming? Is it good or bad? If we were going to add some friction into this, since it's so high friction or high commitment, would that help? So the test that we put together, it was pretty simple. We took it and split it out into 3 different pages. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. Another piece of our framework is we have this idea of the why hypothesis. Do you like it? I love it. I got a TM on it. So anyway, why hypothesis. So it's a slightly different version of a hypothesis. And it's basically about the customer theory. It's not a, if we do this and this, then this will happen. It says more, if this wins, this is what we think we're going to learn. So if this three-step purchase process wins, the theme park visitors may be easily overwhelmed with buying information due to the pricey purchase. That's what we think we might learn if this works. So how did it do? It did great. It was a huge win, biggest win ever. It was our first test. Thank God it won. It's really good. It was an 8-figure impact to their revenue. So it was great. So then we went on to think about why did it win and all that. Got some champagne. Really easy. We're like, okay, well, we think we're right. We think they're overwhelmed with buying information. And we moved on to the next thing. So the next test was around the navigation. Looking at this, you can pick your 1-day or 2-day tickets. There's a little toggle in there. It's a little weird. You don't usually have a toggle in a navigation. You can select your date, you can continue, and it will push you right into that path. So how can we maybe make this better? We thought maybe it's a problem that doesn't show all your ticket options. The annual pass is pretty important and will get you to the park more often, buy more churros. It's great for everybody. So would people buy more annual passes if we made it easier for them to find? Then we also thought, is the toggle helpful or not helpful? And it's a little bit boring. If we made it look prettier, would that help? Is an issue today. So here is the new layout. We took the toggle away. You can now see the annual passes and all the other ticket options together, added some visual interest. The why hypothesis in this case was that if this wins, we think that visitors will buy annual passes if we make it easier for them to discover them. We're learning that people want them and they were having a hard time finding them. How did it do? It did pretty well with click-through rate. And then it had a 3% loss in revenue. Not great. So you can look at it again, think what really happened here. So many changes. We can come up with a lot of different why statements. If you really look at it, is the icons, is the images, some more choices, what's going on here? So some of our thoughts were that, well, maybe most visitors are just simply not interested in buying annual passes online, even if you make it easier to find. They're just not interested. They want the 1- and 2-day passes. Maybe giving them all this choice overwhelmed them and created some anxiety since this might be a high consideration purchase. Maybe the new design just made it hard to find the most popular option, which is the 1- and 2-day passes. Maybe the contrast wasn't helpful. That toggle just moved it out of your eye path over to the left. So who knows? Those are some ideas. We decided to look at the middle one. And actually, when we wrote that down, we're like, oh my gosh, that actually supports the first insight. Even though this is not a winning test, it might just be more evidence that theme park visitors are easily overwhelmed with buying information because it's a pricey purchase. So now we have 2 supporting experiments for this idea. And now we only need 3 more to be able to turn this into a key insight. But it's great is now we are able to actually learn something from this losing test. A losing test is like the best time to ask why. First of all, it's unexpected. You expect it to win. That's why you built it and spent all that time on it. And if it doesn't, your confirmation bias is going to be challenged, and that is the time that you can learn. You're feeling some pain, it's a little bit embarrassing, you kind of don't want to tell people, but if you do turn it into an insight in this way, it can really start to add value to the organization, and you can learn from it and move on in a productive way. And you can learn something new about your customer. Maybe we had data that showed that most people care about the 1- to 2-day passes versus the annual pass, but it helps you build a better case for really why your customers are coming online, what they're looking for, and then how to build the best experience for them. So back to my main point, is that key insights are our opportunity. they help us discover the lasting insight from our customers. Focusing on just what works is just missing this huge opportunity for us to build a culture of experimentation throughout the organization, have ideas actually help the entire organization learn from them, and it helps us make our investment in experimentation last far longer because things are changing, we're redesigning things all the time. If we can actually find a way to learn and keep this long-term viewpoint, that is, I think, what the future of experimentation and the full promise of it holds. And then whoever owns the narrative wins. The narrative is the key insight. And as soon as we are focusing on that and building our data and getting used to synthesizing everything and turning it into a story, I think it makes experimentation far more powerful in the organization. I think we all know how this can really drive all strategic decisions. Everything should be tested before a decision is made, and it helps everyone take all this data and turning it into something meaningful that we can all latch onto. So back to Isaac Newton. What if he never asked why? If there was ever a key insight, it was gravity. My employees suggested I drop the mic here, but instead I'm going to hold on to it and take your questions. Thanks, everybody. And by the way, there is, if you want more information about our framework, we have a landing page that talks about it, talks about hypothesis and the altitudes in more detail. I haven't shown the framework fully, but we can see it there. And also, of course, stop by our booth anytime. We're happy to chat about it. Yep.
Real quick, sorry, Hi. Where did the magic number of 5 experiment that you need to validate that you have a key insight come from?
Well, it's we thought that was, we want to have there is no study that led to that. It's probably just more from 15 years of experience of testing. If you think you can do it in 4, go for it. If you think you need 6, it's something that we just think is the right number based on our experience. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. That was a tease. Here you go.
Thank you. Are there any customer theories that you kind of consider like baseline that you maybe customize for different clients, like maybe based on like buying behaviors for like device types or like location or something like that?
Customer theories that are baseline that we...
Like that you consider baseline basically, or like universal.
Like the satellite level that are... so specific examples of something that we think, just things that work across the board. I think like mobile, usually want it to be simple. You know, it's a much smaller form factor, and so usually less information is better on mobile. There's definitely some things kind of across the board. I mean, it's certainly different for every, vertical. Social proof as a high-level idea works everywhere. Scarcity. People love sales. Yeah, there's certainly things that we are starting to see across the board with our clients, but we don't use the word best practice very often because I think their customers are so different across different organizations. I remember we had this winning test that was huge for Toys R Us when they were in business, and and did the same kind of thing for Barnes & Noble. We thought toys versus books, kind of similar, totally opposite results. And it shows that people are buying toys with totally different intent than when they go online to buy a book. Totally different customers.
Yeah.
So it's really hard.
Yeah, thank you.
We have another question here.
When you show the slides and you say here are 4 ideas, we think it could be one of these, but you don't really say how you're coming up with that. Is it just your intuition? Are you doing contextual inquiry? Are you conducting interviews with actual users, or is it your intuition?
Well, if you have qualitative analysis that you can point to help support any of these insights or these customer theories, then absolutely use it. I mean, this is just simply a framework for you to organize different explanations. And if you have other evidence that supports a specific explanation, absolutely use it. These are just, what we're looking for is what is transferable in the organization. There may be other ways, and it's not part of this model, that other categories for explanations that you can use, but we're trying to help take a lot of different points of views and organize it in a way that is helpful, that you can scale.
Brooks, thank you for the presentation. Really a follow-up question to that. In your experience of testing, what user feedback have you found to be most useful? Is it usability tests or interviews or other mechanisms that you bring in order to generate the ideas for why people aren't converting?
I really do not like focus groups. I think focus groups are not helpful at all. I think it's great when you are the best I really like are unmoderated. I mean, usability testing or usertesting.com is fine. I think it's pretty good, useful, cheap, gives you a lot of great stuff. I think the best is if it's an unmoderated, I think it's a concurrent think aloud protocol that in a lab where you let someone go and let them kind of just mess around on your site. No one's there, they're doing it on their own. But you record them, and then you come back around with a researcher and replay their session back to them, and you ask them what they were thinking at different points. And so that way they're letting them do stuff without directing them in any way, but then you can also let them tell you what was going on in their mind, so you get a little extra insight. We did this once a couple of years ago. We were doing one of those sessions for this baby site, and we wanted to be very scientific, very clean, good lab, and bring in all these moms in by themselves to mess around on the site and give us feedback. And one of them their childcare fell through, and so she wanted to come in with her 9-month-old baby, and I was like, I don't know, it's going to kind of mess up our process. And then I was like, wait, I'm a total idiot. Of course she can come with her baby. Like, this is her natural environment. And so she came with this baby, and oh my God, it just changed everything. Like, to watch a woman with this baby on her lap and the distractions she has to deal with, it was incredible insight to see that. So I think there's lots of options, but I think that's a good one. Yep, go ahead.
So in your theme park as an example, we're talking about the second test.
Yep.
In your theme park. Hello. In your theme park example, the second test you were talking about testing multiple elements together, right? And you're confused as in which cars to change, etc. In hindsight, do you think it would have been better to test those elements individually rather than together?
Yes, that would have been better. There's always a question, like, do you have the traffic to be able to isolate all the way down? Ideally, we would isolate one at a time. We may go back and try to do that if we have the traffic on that page to be able to do it. In retrospect, that test should have been probably designed slightly differently. That's what maybe it wouldn't have lost. But I think it's a lot of times you just simply, you can't test the tiny. It just will be flat. Even if it doesn't work, you won't be able to detect the signal based on the data. So sometimes you have to take a risk and test multiple things at once, even knowing that it's going to make it harder to know exactly why it won or didn't win.
We'll do one on this side real quick.
Hi. So in the same example, I noticed that when you told us the results, it was very summary. You didn't include any measure of confidence. Mm-hmm. My question is, when you talk to customers, do you typically give them some measure of confidence? Percentages, p-values, anything like that? And my question isn't about your metrics, it's about communication.
Yes, we talk about those were confident numbers. We actually have a very high bar for calling a win, and it is always on the longest scale metric. It's always at 95% confidence. We have the minimum detectable lift. We have a very rigorous process on calling a win, and it's kind of irritating. Sometimes I look at our tests and I'm like, God, I really want to call this a win, but it didn't. It was at 89% confident, and we can't do it. So yeah, we do communicate all that. Yep. Do I have any?
We'll take the last one right here.
Great.
So like in the theme park example, when there's e-commerce versus like a physical box office, is there any sort of fear with something like that like people that are gonna come and we might have just transferred ticket sales? Did the client ask about that, or
Cannibalizing,
how'd
yeah.
you go about like validating and measuring that?
That is something that we think about. Is it actually incremental revenue, or is it just transition? Cannibalizing the other channel. In their case, they would like, of course, to move it online if they feel like it will make it easier. If they get a customer to commit to buying the ticket ahead of time, the likelihood they're going to show up is much higher. Versus, so they're assuming they're bringing in another market. At the end of the day, they just want to make it better for their customers. Who wants to stay in a long, hot line at the beginning of your day? And might as well, it's just a better experience. So they don't really care that much about it.
Fantastic. Tick. All right, Brooks, thank you so very much.
Thanks, everybody.
What a great conversation. And a reminder, Brooks Bell, they visit their booth, continue these conversations. Great questions. A reminder also, from 12 to 12:45, there are workshops. So grab some food, go to the workshops, and keep on learning. Thank you so much.